Ryan Coogler ain't win Best Director, and honestly, that doesn't really say anything about how good he is. Because if you're judging directors by awards, you're already looking at the wrong thing. What makes Coogler stand out as a director is how specific he is with emotion. If you watch his films, especially Creed or Black Panther, the performances don't feel general, they feel intentional. Every actor seems like they understand exactly what their character wants in the scene, and more importantly, what they're not saying. And that usually comes from the director. Coogler is very precise about emotional context. He's not just telling actors what's happening in the scene, he's making sure they understand what's underneath it. That's why his scenes feel so grounded, even when the scale is huge, because performances are always anchored in something real. You can see it in the way he lets moments breathe too. He's not rushing through emotions just to get to the next plot point. He'll sit in reaction or let silence carry part of the scene, and that only works if an actor knows exactly what they're holding on to internally. A lot of directors try to control performances by giving more notes, more adjustments, more direction, but Coogler's control comes from clarity before the camera even rolls. So when they're actually shooting, the actor isn't searching, they're executing something they already understand. If you want to actually apply this, one thing you can start doing is before the scene, don't just tell your actors what's happening. Tell them what their character is trying to get from the other person and what they're avoiding saying out loud. That one shift forces the performances to have intention instead of emotion. And that's why his performances feel so natural. It's not that they're doing less, it's that they're doing exactly what the scene requires. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's the part people miss out about directing. It's not just about how much you say on set, it's about how clear you are before you get there. Because when clarity is there, everything else, performance, pacing, and emotion falls into place. A lot of people talk about Zendaya as a great actress, especially after Euphoria. But what people don't always realize is how much directing and camera placement are shaping how we experience her performance. Because emotion on screen isn't just about what the actor is doing, it's about how close we are to it. If you put a performance in a wide shot, it feels distant, observational. But the second you move into a close-up, every small thought becomes visible. And directors who understand that use the camera to control when the audience connects to a character. In Euphoria, there are moments where the camera stays closer on her longer than you would expect. And it forces you to sit in what she's feeling, even when nothing is being said. That's not just acting, that's directing. A lot of directors treat the camera like it's just there to capture the performance, but it's actually shaping the performance. The distance, the lens, the timing of when you push in or hold back, all of that changes how the audience reads the exact same acting choices. And if you actually want to apply this, one thing you can start doing is before you shoot a scene, decide where the audience is supposed to emotionally connect and use only your close-ups there. Don't just cover everything, because when everything is close, nothing feels important. But when you're intentional about it, when you move in, the performance hits harder without the actor having to do more. And that's the difference between just filming a performance and directing how it's experienced. Miles Caton is a first-time actor, and somehow he's holding his own in Sinners next to actors who've been doing this for decades. And that usually doesn't happen by accident. Because when a new or non-actor gives a strong performance, it's not just talent, it's directing. Experienced directors don't treat first-time actors the same way they treat trained ones. They don't overload them with technical notes or try to shape the performance too much, because that usually is what makes it fall apart. Instead, they simplify everything. They focus the actor on one clear objective, what the character wants in the scene, and let the rest come naturally. Because non-actors are usually more instinctive than technical, and the moment you make them overthink, you lose what makes them interesting. You can see it in how scenes are structured around them. Directors will often adjust blocking, coverage, and even pacing to support the performance instead of exposing it. They might stay a little longer in moments where the actor feels grounded or avoid angles that make the performance feel stiff. That's intentional. And if you want to apply this, one thing you can start doing when working with a new actor is stop giving line readings or emotional results. Instead, give them one simple action to play, like get them to stay or don't let them see how you feel. That gives them something to do instead of something to perform. And that's what usually makes the performance feel real. Because the goal isn't to make a first-time actor act like a professional, it's to create an environment where they don't have to. And when that's done right, you end up with performances that feel just as strong, even more natural than actors with years of experience. Actors and directors disagree more often than people think. But the problem isn't the disagreement, it's how it's handled in the moment. Because once you're on set, you don't have time to debate the entire character. You have to make a decision that keeps the scene moving. You can see this in interviews with actors like Robert Pattinson, who's talked about having very different interpretations of his character while working on Twilight. And that kind of situation happens all the time. The mistake a lot of directors make is they try to immediately shut it down or prove they're right. But the second it turns into that, the actor stops collaborating and starts protecting their performance. So now, even if they follow your direction, it feels forced. The better approach is to figure out what the disagreement is actually about. Most of the time, it's not even the entire scene. It's one intention, one moment, one choice. So instead of arguing the whole performance, isolate the difference. You can literally ask, where are you playing in this moment? And compare that to what they need and what you need. That's the part a lot of directors struggle with, being willing to adjust without losing control of the scene. But if their choice still supports the story, it's not a loss. It's an upgrade. And if it doesn't, then you redirect it in a way that still respects their approach. You don't say, that's wrong. You give them a different action to play that naturally moves it closer to your vision. And if you want to apply this, the biggest thing is to stop treating disagreements like a problem to win and start treating them like information. Because the way an actor is seeing the scene tells you how they're thinking. And once you understand that, it's a lot easier to guide performances without breaking it. And that's the balance. Holding your vision while still leaving room for the actor to bring something you didn't expect. Some of the most compelling characters aren't likable at all. And a lot of directors struggle with that because they feel like the audience needs someone to root for. But if you look at Whiplash, J.K. Simmons' character isn't trying to be liked in any way. And it doesn't hurt the film. It actually makes it stronger. Because the performance isn't completely committed to his perspective. He doesn't see himself as abusive. He sees himself as necessary. And that's the difference. A lot of directors will start to soften the character like that. Give them moments to feel more sympathetic or easier to digest. But that usually weakens the performance because now the character feels inconsistent. One moment they're intense, the next moment they're pulled back so the audience stays comfortable. But in Whiplash, the direction never does that. It lets the character stay exactly where he is. The tension comes from how far he's willing to go. And that's what keeps you watching. You're not watching because you like him. You're watching because you understand what he wants and how far he's willing to push to get it. If you actually want to apply this, one thing you can start doing is when working with a character that isn't likable, stop trying to balance them out and focus on what they believe justifies their behavior. Then direct the performance from that place. Because once the character feels justified, the audience doesn't need to agree with them. And that's what makes a character compelling instead of just likable. One of the biggest mistakes directors make on set is giving sensitive notes to an actor in front of everyone. Because the moment a note feels like a correction in public, the actor stops focusing on the scene and starts focusing on how they're being perceived. And that changes performance immediately. You can even hear actors like Viola Davis talk about how vulnerable acting actually is. So when a note comes in front of the whole crew, it can feel less like direction and more like exposure. And most directors don't mean to do that. They're just trying to move fast. But there's a difference between efficiency and awareness. If the note is technical, like blocking or timing, that's fine. Say it out loud. But if it's about performance, especially if something isn't working, that should almost always be a private conversation. Because the goal is to adjust the performance without affecting the actor's confidence. And once confidence is gone, everything becomes harder to fix. A better approach is to pull the actor aside, keep it quick, and be specific. Not a long speech, just a clear adjustment they can apply immediately. And even how you do it matters. If you call them over in a way that feels urgent or tense, they'll already assume something is wrong. But if it feels calm and focused, it keeps them grounded. And if you want to apply this, a simple rule you can follow is if the note will make you feel self-conscious hearing it in front of a group, don't give it publicly. Take the extra 20 seconds and say it privately, because protecting the actor's space is a part of the job. And when that space is intact, the performance stays intact too. Spike Lee directs performances with a level of intensity that a lot of directors are actually afraid to push actors to. If you look at films like Do the Right Thing or Malcolm X, the performances aren't subtle. They're heightened, emotional, sometimes even uncomfortable. And that's not because the actors are overdoing it. It's because the direction is asking for that level. Spike Lee doesn't always aim for naturalism. He aims for impact. He's willing to let a performance sit at a higher emotional pitch if that's what the scene needs. And a lot of directors avoid that because they're scared it'll make it feel like too much. But the reality is, some scenes are supposed to feel like too much. Anger shouldn't always be quiet. Conflict shouldn't always be controlled. Sometimes the scene needs to feel like it's about to break. And that's something you can only get if the director allows the actor to go there. What Spike Lee does well is he creates an environment where the intensity is the intentional, not chaotic. The tone of the film supports it. The pacing supports it. And when the actor pushes, it feels like it's earned. A lot of directors try to keep everything in the same emotional range, and that's why their films feel flat. But when you allow certain moments to sit, spike in intensity, the entire film becomes dynamic. And if you actually want to apply this, one thing you can do is identify which scenes in the film are supposed to sit at a higher emotional level and give your actors permission to push further than what feels safe. Not every scene, but the right ones. Because sometimes the performance doesn't need to be pulled back. It needs to be pushed forward. And that's the difference between a scene that feels controlled and one that actually hits. A lot of directors spend most of the take watching a monitor. But Quentin Tarantino has talked about how he prefers to be right next to the camera, watching the performances happen in real time. And that might seem like a small difference, but it actually changes how you direct. Because when you're watching a monitor, you're seeing the frame. You're thinking about composition, how it looks, whether it's working on the screen. But when you're watching the actor directly, you're paying attention to something different. You're feeling the performance. You're noticing timing, energy, small shifts that don't always translate the same way on screen. And that affects the notes you give. A lot of directors end up giving notes based on how something looked instead of how it felt. And those aren't always the same thing. So you get performances that are technically correct. What Tarantino is prioritizing is connection. He's watching the actor as a person in the moment and not just an image on the frame. And that allows him to respond to what's actually happening instead of what it looks like it should be. That doesn't mean a monitor isn't important. You still need to check the frame, continuity, all of that. But if you're only watching through a screen, you can miss what's happening right in front of you. And if you want to apply this, one thing you can start doing is on at least one take, step away from the monitor and just watch the actors directly. Don't think about the shot, don't think about coverage, just watch the performance. Because sometimes what you feel in the room is different from what you see on the screen. And as a director, you need to be aware of both. That's how you make sure the scene isn't just working visually, but it's actually landing. Sometimes when a performance isn't working, it's not because the actor is doing too little. It's because they're doing too much. And a lot of directors don't know how to fix that without shutting the actor down. Because the instinct is to say something like, pull it back or do less. But that usually doesn't help. It just makes the actor more self-aware, and now they're thinking instead of acting. You can even see this in performances from actors like Leonardo DiCaprio, where the energy is high, but it still feels controlled. The difference is the performance is always tied to a clear objective. He's not just expressing emotion. He's trying to get something from the other person in the scene. And that's what keeps it grounded. A lot of actors start to push when they're trying to hit a result instead of playing an action. So instead of telling them to do less, the better approach is to redirect what they're focusing on. Give them something more specific to play that naturally reduces the performance. For example, instead of saying, bring the emotion down, you might say, try to hide how much this is affecting you. Or, don't let them see that you're upset. Now the actor has something to do, and the performance becomes more controlled without feeling restricted. Another thing is adjusting the stakes. Sometimes actors push because they think the moment needs to feel bigger than it actually does. But if you ground the scene in something more specific, the performance settles on its own. And if you want to apply this, the next time a performance feels like it's too much, don't try to reduce it directly. Change the objective, because when the objective is clear, the performance usually calibrates itself. And that's how you get something that feels real instead of performed. One thing a lot of directors overlook is what an actor is doing with their hands in the scene. And it sounds small, but it can completely change how a performance feels. If you watch actors like Timothée Chalamet, especially in more intimate scenes, his hands are almost never neutral. He's holding something, fidgeting, touching his face, adjusting his clothes. There's always some kind of physical behavior happening underneath the dialogue. And that's not random. That's a part of the performance. Because when an actor's hands are just sitting there with nothing to do, the performance can feel staged or disconnected. But when there's a subtle action happening, it gives the scene texture. It feels like the character is thinking, processing, or holding something in. A lot of directors focus on the face and the lines, but ignore the rest of the body. And that's where you lose a layer of realism.
You can even use this to shape the tone of a scene. If a character is calm but their hands are restless, it creates tension. If the hands are still, it can feel controlled or shut down. And if you want to apply this, the next time you're directing a scene, don't just ask what the actor is saying. Ask what they're doing physically while they're saying it. Give them a simple action if needed. Something small, not distracting, but intentional. Because sometimes what makes a performance feel real isn't the dialogue, it's in what the body is doing around it.